Good evening, Breathless Watchers, and welcome to the REDUX REPORT, your weekly summary for all the global news. Do you want to know what's happening in the world? There's so much going on. How can you keep track? Well, we are here to elucidate, to enlighten, to inform. My name is Newsfist, and I'm joined here, of course, by the inimitable Black Pigeon Speaks. How you doing, Felix?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for that intro there, Mr. Newsfist. I'd like to thank everyone who's joined us. We're going to be we've got so many things that we can go through here today. It's almost like a stuffed packed show today. And as again, I should probably tell everyone I'm a little bit sleepy, so please bear with me. With that said, how you been this past week?
Oh man, so much has happened. Like it you know, that old saying, you know, there's years where nothing happens and weeks where years happen. It has been insane. Every single day it's been a new thing. I could probably do a show every day. The Telegram chat is just full of like stuff. We've got, you know, I mean, it's all about Munich Security Conference, Ukraine, the US sort of basically signaling that they might pull out of Europe. I suspect this is probably just a plot to make the Europeans, like, you know, actually listen. There was JD Vance's incredible speech at the Munich Security Conference where he was basically sort of saying what I had hoped the Americans would be saying. You know, if you want to be part of the West world, you got to be a Western democracy. And if you call yourself a Western democracy, maybe you should start acting like one and stop locking your people up for speech and praying in their heads and doing all that. So yeah, it's been amazing, mate.
The speech by JD Vance, and we'll get into that as the show progresses, was quite incredible. A lot of people were expecting him to talk about Russia, about Ukraine, and possibly the challenges of China. But he actually used his platform as his first international speech as vice president to come down hard on Europeans, especially on their basically there's no other word for it, backsliding on democratic norms. He used, as far as we'll get into that, but he used as examples of elderly British men, an elderly British man who was across the street. I believe it was about maybe 150 yards away from a clinic that, how should we say it? A clinic that, what do they call it? What's the euphemism in the United States? Planned Parenthood clinic.
Yeah. It's for mothers, to-be mothers who
are considering not being mothers,
who wish to correct a biological mistake. The thing about this too is that the guy involved was praying for a child of his that
his son, he said,
who via this procedure was not allowed to enter in the world. Oh man, talking YouTube is it's really tough. He was praying sort of, you know, with the regret of having made this choice and got arrested. And he's not the only one. There's been a bunch of these. There was like a lady who was arrested for silently praying. For those of you who don't know, the UK government has declared what do they call them? Like safety zones or
safety
like
zones. That. Yes, exactly. Safety zones around the premises.
Yeah. And you're not allowed to. You're not even allowed to pray
silently by yourself. Not holding it should be indicated. He wasn't holding placards. He wasn't speaking to anyone entering or exiting. He wasn't doing anything other than praying for his son across the street silently. And this man was charged and arrested.
I think we could say terminations would probably be a way of saying it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think people have figured it out. Yeah. So
in Scotland, the law is even more draconian. The zones not only cover public places, but also cover people's homes. They have special sort of access ways that must be preserved for these special clinics. And if you're praying too loudly and anyone can hear you outside your house, you might get a visit from the thought police to see if you got a praying license there. And the government don't like to give out the praying license unless you are of like certain Middle Eastern religions, in which case that's absolutely fine. And it's, you know,
absolutely. There's and we might have him on one of our Redux reports in the future, probably on a Rumble exclusive, is Mark Collette. And he's the leader of a group within the United Kingdom called the Patriotic Alternative. And we might have them on for example, I don't know, we might have him on in the future on a Rumble exclusive. But, or that would also be on, for example, BitChute and a couple of the other alt tech platforms. Couldn't have a person like that on YouTube because of the draconian censorship of this site. But there was a recent BBC hit job on his organization. It was after a 1-year supposed undercover. Well, it wasn't supposed, but it was. I mean, I don't even understand what the BBC is up with, where they're putting so-called journalists pretending to be members of.
I can answer that question. I know why they're doing it. It became clear today. Basically, they're worried about Homeland Party. And the way they're going after Homeland is by attempting to smear them by linking them with PA. That seems to be the play, basically, because they can't have people not being particularly keen on all the new enrichment that the UK is.
Interestingly, they're creating the problem, and then they're coming down, cracking hard down on people that question the problem that they've created. And I mean, we can get into that as well. There was not only over this weekend already, there's been 2 heinous crimes, one in Germany and one in Austria. I just woke up, and there's something that's happened in Austria. We can get into that in a minute.
It's every day now. Like I have become numb. I have just become numb. It is practically every day now. And and to loop back to the Munich Security Conference, all of the German political class are losing their minds at the moment because Vance was basically saying that Alternative for Deutschland is the only sort of party that will fix Germany's migration problem. And of course, the Germans are like, oh my God, you're interfering in our elections. What about democracy? Because, in Germany, democracy, unlike in many countries, democracy doesn't really mean sort of addressing the grievances of the people. Democracy means addressing the grievances of the people whom you already politically agree with and shutting out from political representation the people you don't. Now, usually this works fine, but in the case of the AfD, they're now polling between 20 and 30%. And I suspect the recent attacks in Germany and Austria is only going to make that higher, which means that if the AfD does actually come first in the German elections, which are very soon, I think within a week, they are going to have themselves a real problem. They're going to have to try and pretend to be a democracy whilst at the same time denying the actual winners of the election. Even if AfD come in second place, it's still going to be tricky.
Well, even if they come in first place and they don't have a majority, in many of these countries, Germany is one of them. What you'll have is, because these are parliamentary systems, and I should explain this to our American viewers who aren't aware, these parliamentary systems can create avenues where the winner of an election, but it doesn't have over 50%, they can be effectively shut out by the other groups, the other parties. And they've already said in several different countries, I think Sweden's another one, where the right-wing party, none of the other parties will allow them or work with them. So they're not able to form governments. Yeah, so this is what you have in Germany right now. It's called the traffic light coalition, and the traffic light meaning the different colors that represent the parties. In the United States, red being the Republicans and blue being the Democrats, which is kind of, it's a weird thing, because as far as I've looked into this, it's prior to the 2000 election, there were no party colors in the United States. I mean, you go back prior to the 2000 election, that would be Vice President Al Gore and Governor George W. Bush at the time. Every year it would change. Like some years the election maps would be yellow and purple. Sometimes they'd be, it wasn't a set in stone. But because of the recount, the Chads, and the whole debacle of the 2000 election, the colors got set in stone. And I find it almost ironic that red, being the color of communism, somehow was imparted to the Republican Party, and blue was imparted to the actual communists. Oh, I'm not communists.
Well, if you know anything about color theory, blue is the color of sort of professionalism. It's why a lot of politicians wear blue ties. Just to return quickly to Germany, the thing that you're talking about of shutting people out is, in Germany, is called the firewall, right? In France, it's called the cordon sanitaire. Okay, so it's this idea that I mean, basically,
the sanitation cordon.
Yeah, because World War II, no country in Europe can actually be a functioning democracy, essentially, right? They cannot allow sort of any, right-wing parties to gain any kind of power. Left-wing parties are fine, right? Like, if the literal communists came to power, that would be completely okay. Because communism, of course, never did anything wrong, bros. But if it's sort of anyone who can be sort of, I guess you'd call them, I don't know, call it Weimar jacketing or something. You know, mustache jacketing, right? They just go around and they monster these people. AFD, of course, led by Alice Weidel, the woman who likes other women, who is married to
a Bengali, is she not?
Married to a Bengali, a clearly far right
position, a very far right position. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, very, very, very far right. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the Traffic Light Coalition is so bad because it turns out that trying to make a functioning government just based on the idea that we all hate the right wing doesn't work. I mean, you've got the Greens who are just crazy. I mean, right? Like,
they are in every single country. The Greens, they're crazy in every single country.
Yeah, the starve everyone to death party, basically. The CDU and the Democratic Socialists, I think. And Democratic Socialists are crazy as well. They're like, we're going to have socialism. We're just going to get there democratically.
It is. Well, let's take a look at JD Vance again. I should sort of give an intro to this. JD Vance was in Europe the last couple of days. I believe it was in Munich, correct?
Yes, it was at the Munich Security Conference.
Interestingly, it was Munich that just had an incident with a car of peace over the weekend. Yes, and he basically, as I said, as when the show started, the European leaders are absolutely flabbergasted, as they thought he was going to be talking more so about the security situation in Ukraine, about tariffs, about not tariffs, but tariffs as well as mostly, we're going to keep on the pressure on Russia, and he didn't. He absolutely didn't. He basically, let me see here. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. But he basically slammed European leaders, and we're going to take a look at that right now.
I mean, it's amazing. Like, imagine having a competent government, like even a halfway competent government, right? Every single time JD Vance opens his mouth, I like the guy more. Like, he just amazing.
Yeah, a lot of people, were on him when he when he was chosen, because they couldn't understand. But yeah, he's definitely he's a good orator as well, which is unusual in politics these days. If you go back to the Roman Republic, being an orator was an absolute necessity for any of the men in the Senate. I mean, it was, and it should still be considered an art. People
they select now for an oration that obscures the truth, right? So these people, they are orators, but they're a different type of orator, right? Their whole idea is to say words without imparting any meaning. Whereas Vance, and Trump and Pete Hegseth, they are all the opposite, right? They're straight shooting Americans. Don't take no malarkey.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Of course. All right, so let's take a look at what JD has to say here on this. I just want to get to everyone because I'm still working with this new system here. Make sure we got the sound okay. And if you don't hear it, guys, just put it into the chat so I know, but you probably should be able to.
And expressing opinions isn't election interference. Even when people express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential. And trust me, I say this with all humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk. But what no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered. And expressing opinions isn't election interference.
All right, as you can see, he's definitely coming down on Europeans because you're seeing all over the EU is people having conniption fits, the political class having conniption fits on not only the United States and the re-election of Donald Trump, but his new supposed henchman, the actual real president, Elon Musk. And I think that people aren't very happy about it because Elon Musk, well, he's fairly based. I mean, I imagine growing up in South Africa had something to do with that. Most South
Oh yeah.
Africans that I know, they tend to, the only South Africans you'll see in the media are ones that they're not South Africans, generally speaking, having to deal with the problems that the country is dealing with. But yeah, he's basically tarred and
Did you watch the whole speech?
No, we just watched the first 40.
Yeah, no, because I can basically give you a summary. Right?
Oh yeah, please. Yeah, it's 19 minutes. I didn't watch the whole.
Yeah. Okay, so I watched the whole thing. I would highly recommend watching it. It's one of the best speeches I've seen in a while, and I watch a lot of speeches because I'm an autist. Instead, so everyone was expecting Vance to come along and do the usual boilerplate that would have come out of the Biden administration, right? This is the Munich Security Conference, after all, the European Security Conference. He should have come out and talked about Russia, China, NATO, more money, right? More weapons, more no. But instead, right, he basically came out and he said, look, I see a lot of, talk about what it is that Europe is fighting against, but I don't see any talk about what it is that Europe is fighting for. What values are you fighting for, right? He's like, in America, we believe in freedom. I mean, obviously, this is the new administration. If it had, been like a month earlier, right, it would have been the same old people being like, oh, we've got to censor stuff. And he's basically coming out saying, look, when you fought the communists back in the day, the reason the communists lost is because they did not believe in freedom of expression. They didn't believe in innovation, and they lost because they restricted their citizens. And he's basically, what are you doing, Europe, right? Then he goes on to a long sort of like tirade, essentially talking about the abuses that have been happening in the UK. How people have been put in prison for tweets. He goes into quite a long story about the guy at the termination clinic that we were like talking about. It's amazing. And as I said, the European political class are just absolutely wetting their panties in response. It is crazy.
Well, and one thing a lot of people should know, especially when it comes to the EU, is that none of these people that are in you have your parliaments and you have your political, you've got your MEPs, but the rulers of the EU are bureaucrats. And this is also one of the things that the EU is it's one of the most undemocratic groups or organizations on the planet. And this is why I should say that Vance also compared the European Union and a lot of the backsliding on democracy with the Soviet Union specifically. I think used the word commissars to describe these European elite that are not elected but are choosing this anti-democratic, anti-freedom of speech, and the EU and Europe itself. People should understand just what dire situation Europe is in right now. And I'm going to use the United States as comparatively, and we'll talk about Canada about that in a minute as well. But prior to the 2008 Lehman shocks, the EU and the United States had roughly the same size of economy. And in the time since that, the United States' economy has grown, it's doubled, where Europe hasn't grown at all. In fact, countries like Germany are now either in zero growth or negative growth. And you can see it when you visit European countries. Yeah. The cities are becoming shabby, litter strewn, and just for example, places like London, Paris, what have you, it's getting really hard to live. It's getting very difficult in terms of the just cost of living, comparatively speaking.
I think realistically speaking, all of Europe is in a recession. I'm pretty sure they're fudging the numbers. Look, if the unpleasantness around COVID showed anything. It's that at some point, many people in Europe basically decided, I mean, the US started doing this as well, to be perfectly frank, that, you know, the numbers really don't matter, right? Like what's important is the message. What's important is the propaganda messaging. This is a terrible precedent for a so-called Western democracy, right? Like, you know, to go on like this. I think what they've been doing essentially is propping up these economies just through massive government spending, right? So
absolutely, absolutely.
You know, the reason why they haven't gone into proper recession is, you know, all the people that they're importing, you know, they're giving them money, they're handing out money hand over fist for like crazy government programs, you know, of which Doge has elucidated a bunch. But this kind of stuff is all over Europe. There's a woke waste project in the UK. Shout out to Charlotte Gill on Twitter at woke waste. I highly recommend giving her a follow. She's basically been, you know, documenting the kind of crazy sort of politically oriented stuff the UK government is giving money on. Just for American viewers, by the way, it's important for you to note that in the UK, the USAID, or its sort of English counterpart, is basically folded right into the Foreign Office, the State Department, essentially, right? It's called the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, the FCDO, right? So imagine that the actual Foreign Office, right? It was now like a two-headed hydra. Essentially, the idea of just giving away money for crazy stuff overseas is now sort of its core mission. So yeah, it's pretty bad.
I just as a side note, and we'll get to Canada more specifically later on. And I should say I put out a video a couple of hours ago. It was put on. I haven't actually released it yet. It is on my YouTube channel, and it discusses the same thing with Canada. President Trump is talking about annexing the. Canada's having all of the same problems. I think I've got something on that we'll get into. In the fact that a lot of people are saying that it was actually Justin Trudeau that helped get Donald Trump elected based on his own backsliding of democratic norms during what was the trucker convoy that was rejecting the lockdowns and the sort of absolute state of Canadian democracy. He showed that, you know, well, if you disagree with the government, we're going to debank you, we're going to arrest you, we're going to throw you in jail because you don't agree with the diktats that come out of Ottawa. And as well, Canada under Justin Trudeau, if you take a look at his premiership that started in 2015, and I can't even understand how a country could allow that man even near the levers of power, let alone for a decade. And I've got a brand new video on my channel after this live stream you guys might want to go and watch. And the one thing I was going to bring up is that if the UK were to join and the UK is one of the wealthiest countries in Europe, I might add. This is why the UK has the small boat crisis, is that if the UK were to join the United States as the 51st state, it would be the poorest state in the Union under Mississippi. If Canada were to join, Canada is also going to be in the bottom quarter between Louisiana and Kentucky. And these are not, like, I mean, as beautiful as they might be, they're not sort of economically the states you'd be hoping to be competing against. So Canada, all of these countries that are not only backsliding on democratic norms, they also believe, for example, that the only way to kickstart the economy and get it working again is via massive taxation. So you have...
I mean, they basically believe that the solution to every single economic problem is the government. Really, right? Like this is essentially the problem, right? They have embraced statism sort of like wholeheartedly. Every single problem is the purview of the state, from the economy to, you know, what people think to what people do. It's insane.
You said we had a super chat. Do you want to read that for us?
Yep. So $25. Thank you very much from Soka City. In Canada, you are considered a full-time student on just 2 classes a semester if you have ADHD. Wow, what a grift. Which can be diagnosed over the phone by a private company for $600. This allows full access to student grants, loans, benefits, bus pass, etc., tax credits. This country is hackable. The UK is very, very similar. I can't speak for Canada, but in the UK, everything is easier if you are if you're not white, basically, right? Like, and if you have the wrong political views, then everything gets sort of, progressively harder, basically, especially in academia. And in university, there's been, much like in the US and Canada, there's sort of been a basic purge of anyone who is anywhere to the right of Mao Zedong, basically. And this has contributed to an incredible decline in academic standards, just for all kinds of reasons. Like, I know that Canada has a lot of problems with Indian migrants. In the UK, it's mainly Pakistanis, but a lot of people who are going to universities, they don't speak English very well. They don't really care about the subject. It's just sort of like a thing they're doing to like get a piece of paper. It's a very, very different vibe. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Thanks for the super chat, Soka City. And we also have one from Sade Sapiente for $3. Great show. Thank you very much, Sade. Much appreciated. And you can send, if you'd like us to reply to your messages, you can send via Entropy. Felix really should have put it in the YouTube chat and pinned it so that everyone can see it. I can't pin it because I've only got mod privileges.
Oh, yeah. Also, there is the ability to do so on Rumble Rants, and also on YouTube for now,
That's
obviously.
Right.
I will pin it right now. Let's see.
Do you want your streamers to starve to death? Of course you don't. Of course you don't, dear viewer. Give us some money so that we can live another day and stream this content to you. Remember, streamers are people too. Do your part.
All right, here we are. So it is pinned now. So
Nice.
What I want to get to as well, okay, is we'll move over. So we'll get to U.S. news, but I think we're kind of already Vance, Europe. Let's get into our good friend President Vladimir Zelensky. It's not looking too good for him right now. Yeah. I'll say it. It's not looking too good for him. He has basically come out and well, I mean, you know about the rare earth the rare earth minerals that President Trump is demanding from him.
Yeah. Did you get that minerals map that I sent you, by the way?
I did not. Send it again, and I'll put it up.
It's in the Telegram channel. So just for people who are unaware, right? Trump basically came in and he's like, Vladimir, we've given you billions and billions of dollars, and it doesn't look like you're going to be able to pay us back. We noticed that you've got a lot of rare earth minerals in Ukraine. We need them for all kinds of stuff. How about you sign over the rights to these rare earth minerals? Now, Zelensky, of course, is not keen on this idea because he thought, the money was basically for free. And there is also the small matter that I believe BlackRock has basically bought all of Ukraine, right? So Zelensky, I believe, then pivoted to basically saying, I'm not sure if he said it directly, but the chattering classes were basically saying, yes, but all the rare earth minerals are in the places controlled by Russia.
Exactly.
They're not. They're not at all. There is actually a massive strip to the north of the country around Kiev and its environs that has tons of rare earth minerals. So what Trump is basically saying, if he proceeds with the peace deal as enumerated, that Russia would be able to keep the 4 oblasts that they have annexed, would be basically that he wants all of the land around Kiev for mineral development. I can't imagine the Ukrainians are too happy about that. Well, Zelensky and his crew, I don't think they really care about what
I don't think they really care. I mean, if you take a look at this war, it is, I mean, I don't understand how anybody in any right mind, I believe it was the secretary, I believe he was the Secretary of State, and he was also a national security advisor, Henry Kissinger, under President Nixon. He has a really famous quote saying, it's dangerous to be America's friend. It's dangerous to be America's enemy, but it's absolutely fatal to be America's friend.
Yeah, there are a lot of talking about that quote. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, all I was going to say with regards to that is, the United States, I mean, he's considered that it was under Boris Johnson that he was the one that went to, but obviously he went there on the behest of the U.S. on Washington when in Istanbul, a month into the conflict in 2022, when they had almost reached a peace deal. It was Boris Johnson that arrived in Istanbul and said, okay, no. I think we should fight them. We're going to fight them. And what you have now is a country where a quarter of the population is left. All the young women have left. I mean, 50% of the brothels in Berlin are now made up of Ukrainian girls. And all the men are almost all, there's no men left. I mean, this is the problem that they're having with recruitment. Not only are they going out into press gangs across the streets, they're literally going into cafes, into restaurants, into movie theaters, and they're dragging people out, kicking and screaming, throwing them in the back of a van, sending them up to the front. There was actually just recently, and I'll try to find that, there was an 18-year-old kid from the UK, and he thought, okay, well, there's a war, and maybe I played Call of Duty or whatever video game, and I really enjoyed it, so I'm going to go and fight as a mercenary over in the fight over in Ukraine. 5 minutes into his first deployment, his first time, he was dead by Ukrainian drones, and
Russian drones.
Russian drones, excuse me, Russian drones. And so what you have is in this fight right now, you're literally running out of manpower. So you've got, at the end of this, you have BlackRock owning a sizable chunk of the farmland. Perhaps the United States owning a sizable chunk of Ukraine's rare earth minerals. You have very few young women that have stayed. And I mean, I really doubt many of them will come back, because if you're settled in a Western welfare state, somewhere like Germany, for example, where you can sit in your apartment all day long and collect a check, have a roof over your head, food in your belly, or you can go back to a country that's been utterly destroyed.
Well, don't worry. I mean, I believe it was Zelensky who came out and said, well, now that so many people in Ukraine have died, we're going to have to, import a whole bunch of migrants.
I've heard of that, and people have scoffed at that. But I would say, for example, about that is, people say, well, Ukraine is poor. Yeah, perhaps they are. But I should also say is that, for example, after the Second World War, so was, most of the countries in Europe, Germany, the UK. I mean, most of them were pretty much destroyed by the war.
Yeah, blow up that image.
Yeah, I am doing that right now.
Okay, so for people watching, that bright blue sort of stripe in the northeast of the country, I believe, is rare earth metals. Oh God, I can't read that thing to save my life. But yeah, if it
is already at somewhat, like, even at this level, it's a little bit blurry. It's not a very good map.
Yeah. But my point is this: there are exploitable resources all over the country, not just in places that Russia has annexed. So Trump could. This is the question, right? If Trump takes them, if America takes them over, is he going to sell them on? Like, will he take them off BlackRock, then turn around and sell them back to BlackRock again?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this whatever the future is for the Ukraine and the country, it is probably it's just ruined. I mean, it's ruined. And perhaps, I have read that, exactly the same thing, that they're going to try and repopulate it via multiculturalist tendencies. So, I mean, even if such a thing is to happen, I mean, the country is going to take generations upon generations to recover. I mean, you look at somewhere like Ireland, as far as I understand it, Ireland's population is still smaller than it was prior to the potato famine 200 years ago. So it does take a lot of time for these things to happen. There is one comment I want to show, and rest in peace, Gonzalo Lira. God, I love that guy. Yeah, as probably many of you will know, I did quite a few things with Gonzalo. I knew him personally, and he was a good guy, and he's been proven, I mean, right on pretty much everything he said. Even though he said it in a somewhat bombastic manner, that was Coach Red Pill. He was very much a showman. Unfortunately, he was being a showman in the wrong place, and he paid a heavy price for it. And God bless him. I mean, God bless his kids too, his young children who will grow up without a father. which is really quite sad. But yeah, anyway, going back to, I want to take a couple of, I want to change it up here on the screen here. I want to give us.
Should we talk about the American position on Ukraine and how it's freaking Europeans
Yeah,
out?
exactly. Why don't you start while I get the screen ready?
Okay, so basically, the Americans rocked up at the Munich Security Conference, and a couple of extremely disturbing things from the European point and the Ukrainian point of view had happened. The first horrible thing that happened was that Trump actually had a phone call with Vladimir Putin, right? It went for apparently 90 minutes. Zelensky was not there to get in between them, was not there to muddy the waters. None of the Europeans were there to muddy the waters. Apparently, this was just a direct phone call between Trump and Putin. Trump put out a very, very sort of gushing tweet, basically saying, "I had a great talk with Vladimir. He's a nice guy. We had many points of agreement. We even talked about common sense, which is one of my favorite things. I love common sense. There will be more contacts. We will be like meeting in person." Now, basically, all of the left in America and the Europeans like absolutely lost their mind at this, right? Then, as if that wasn't bad enough, Pete Hegseth and a few other people actually went over to Moscow to talk with the Russians. And when Hegseth got back, he basically said, well, look, we have to acknowledge the reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground is that Russia has annexed Crimea and most of the 4 oblasts. And returning this territory to Ukraine is not a viable option, right?
Neither is setting up international tribunals and having Russia's leaders hand themselves over to a war crimes tribunal.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
the entire what is it called with Zelensky? The entirety of his peace plan is just it's pie in the sky.
Oh yeah. But what Hegseth also said was very, very interesting. He said that essentially they should freeze the conflict as it is. They would have peacekeepers, but they would not be American peacekeepers, right? There are going to be no American military in Ukraine. They'll have to source peacekeepers, basically, he said, from Europe, right? Ukraine will never join NATO, right? Which is only surprising, by the way, to the NATO types, right? No one ever really thought that Ukraine was going to join NATO.
And it also was one of the fundamental, if not the fundamental red line for this entire conflict.
Yep.
It's hilarious that we're going to join NATO because that's our demand for security. And yeah, it was never going to happen. Never.
And more importantly, Hegseth said that any peacekeepers that are in Ukraine would not be covered by Article 5. Now, this is very, very important, of course, because it means that if Poland, for example, or some other European country puts in peacekeepers and something kicks off, they will not be able to trigger Article 5 and suck the rest of NATO into this war. Now, I've been saying this for a while, and most observers that seem to know what they're talking about agree that for a long time, Ukraine has essentially been trying to get the rest of NATO into the war by triggering Article 5. Indeed, there was a drone strike on the Chernobyl nuclear plant.
Yeah, I've got that. Yeah. Interestingly enough on that, sorry, continue on that.
And of course, the Ukrainians are like, see, the evil Russians, they're crazy. But the thing is, right, if you've been watching this conflict for a long time, what inevitably happens is as soon as there is any movement towards peace, right, some kind of like atrocity just conveniently breaks out, right? And it's always the Russians, supposedly, right, who supposedly are trying to sabotage this peace. Now, why the Russians would drone strike the Chernobyl sarcophagus literally after a high-level contact between them and the Americans that might actually get them the peace deal that they want. I mean, look, cui bono, right? And the Russians do not benefit. The Russians basically came out and said a sort of thing from the foreign ministry. They're basically like, look, it's clearly the Ukrainians, right? They do this every single time. And it doesn't seem to have generated the kind of, I mean, I guess in Europe, because, the Europeans, and particularly the British, they'll believe anything, right? Like, in in their fevered imaginations, Putin is Putler, right? He's the return of Mustache Man. He's the sum of all of their fears, which is one of the reasons why the propaganda in the UK works the way that it does. Everything is World War II. Every single time. It just never changes. It's like history froze 80 years ago and nothing has ever happened since. So every single time they need someone taken out, they're like, oh my God, it's the return of Mustache Man. We have to fight them over there, so we don't have to fight them here, blah, 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 blah. It's the same. It's literally, if you ever studied World War II propaganda, it's literally exactly the same slogans. They haven't changed them in 80 years. It's crazy.
Fuck, I've lost my screen here on the thing again. So we're gonna have to. You have the screen there, right? Ukraine says Russia's drone attack hits Chernobyl nuclear plant.
Yeah.
All right. Interestingly, on that point is I want to show you this is a couple of days prior. Oh wow, it's RT. How can RT be even show?
Don't you know they're banned?
Oh my God! Well, oh my God, having a different opinion. It's kind of it's hilarious because just prior to the Chernobyl being hit, the sarcophagus that is the Chernobyl reactor, literally Moscow warns that there were going to be false flags because if you read the headline, it says renewed contacts with Washington have left the Ukrainian government hysterical. And they basically, says right here, he's citing that he believes that it's going to be false flag after false flag after false flag in order to derail the peace efforts that are going on right now in
Yep.
So you do have this already. Yeah, it's coming out. It reminds me a lot of what went on in Syria when that was going on a few years back during the first prior to it being overrun by Islamists. But what you do have is a lot of these things happening. And as you said, I mean, Europeans right now are absolutely kvetching because what they're doing is they're terrified. Excuse me, I'm just looking for it here. President Trump hasn't even offered the European Union or any of the European states a seat at the table. And
oh yeah, it's bad. I mean,
you have so Trump is just bypassing Europeans, and the Europeans are throwing up their fists and like kicking over the pram, saying, "Oh, we have to be at the table." Where Trump's like, "Well, why? Why? You haven't really paid for it. You've done very less than we have." And to be honest, the United States, I mean, all of what European policy is for the last at least 20 years has been whatever at the behest of Washington, the diktats out of Washington. Here, this is what you're doing. Even if the weird part is about this is people in the United States or people in other countries, they moan and groan about how their government doesn't look out for the interests of its people. But this is absolutely the case in Europe, especially. Where you see somewhere like Germany, you even see that you have leaders within that country saying, well, we don't care about what our voters have to say. We're still going to take this direction, whatever the populace has to say. And this has been on issues as varied as nuclear power plants to the conflict in Ukraine. So again, this brings us back to where we began on the sort of backsliding of it. So
if I could just address your earlier point about the peace conference, I got a tweet here actually. So Trump on the 13th, so it's about 3 days ago, was talking. So the Russians and the Americans are going to have a meeting. They were meeting in Munich, right? And U.S. President Trump, officials from U.S. and Russia to meet in Munich on Friday. Ukraine also invited. I did a bit of a tweet on this. Ukraine also invited. Brutal. You are about to have your borders decided for you. Of course, in practice, this is how this has always been done. And anyone who says different is a multilateral idiot. Whether through direct negotiations between belligerents or through a multilateral organization, it always comes down to this. Someone is going to redraw your borders for you. It's not it's not nice, right? Like, I'm not saying like this is going to be good for Ukraine. I'm just saying if you study history, if you study the resolution of conflicts, right, particularly proxy wars in small countries between two larger belligerent blocks, this is always what happens, right? The two large powers, they sit down and they draw some lines on the map and they're like, right, that's it, it's done. That's how Palestine was created, right? Like literally.
Excuse me. Yeah. So what we have here is I want to just bring this up because this is very much. Oh, by the way, we did get a super chat. Just want to say it's kind of cantankerous. I quite like it. For $1.99, Ukraine can still win, but the U.S. must send troops. Yeah, of course. That's exactly what it is.
And more guns, obviously.
And more guns. So this is right here, as you were just saying, just in from Bricks News, is that Zelensky says the Ukraine hasn't been invited to the U.S.-Russia meeting in Saudi Arabia. So they're not even at the table, and neither is the European Union. And this just kind of goes to show the very different sort of styling of the new administration under Trump is dealing in real politic at this point. I mean, they're not even trying to have the mustache or the facade of multilateralism and bringing in these soft European countries that, to be honest, I read that if Trump is to get his way, he's saying that it's not only 2% now for NATO members. He's saying he's demanding 5% for NATO countries to 5% of their GDP. Excuse me. I should explain that. 5% of their GDP should be given over to defense spending. And right now, most all of the countries, I think the only countries that might even reach 2% are Poland and the United Kingdom. They're the only two countries where all of the other ones are, I think Canada hasn't even reached 1%. I mean, the Canadian military is well, I don't really, I mean, it's funny because, I have a British friend. I mean, he's a mutual friend of ours, Alan. And he was saying that during World War I, the only people that the Germans feared in the First World War when they went up against another group were Canadians. Supposedly they were tough guys back, and it makes sense. Back 100 years ago, most of the Canadians were out there living in tundra or in the forest filled with snow. You'd had to be a tough person to live in that country prior to modern central heating. But now, I mean, the Canadian military, it's a joke, right? And,
it was decided, Felix, that tough men are nationalism, and since nationalism is fascism, all of the countries that won supposedly World War II had to be gentled into
neutered
countries full of soy cucks.
Neutered, yeah.
So that,
So this is it. I'm going to just play this really quickly for our audience here, and I believe it should come through. Let me just hike up the sound on this because I want to make sure we get a good sound on this.
It's a relatively low volume clip, so boost it up.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Okay, I'll boost it right up. So Justin, I believe it's interesting because the Ukrainian is Volodymyr Zelensky, but in Russian it's Vladimir. So it's kind of ironic there. But here we go.
First, that maybe there is something at the table, but not on our table. So I didn't see any invitations, envoys, and etc. from Ukraine to meet with some other envoys. But anyway, envoy, this is that national. I mean, this is security advisor, and so we don't have any papers, any invitations, and it's something strange for me to speak in this case, in this format, if before we don't have any negotiation between us and our strategic partners. As I remember, Russia is not our strategic partner. And about...
All right, that was a relatively low clip. There was nothing I could do about that, everybody. Sorry about that. I had it at max on Twitter, and I also had it max on our streaming software. It's just what it is. I think I don't see really any microphones near him, so people are probably collecting their audio.
I can summarize. This is since Munich Security Conference, Zelensky has been basically going around he has been saying, "Oh, it looks like Putin is now the West's best negotiating partner, right? Like, oh, poor Ukraine. Oh my God, right? This is the same. This is basically the same playbook. Him and all of the Europeans are basically like, we have to be there. We have to be at the table, obviously, so they can foil any kind of peace agreement, right? Now, of course, the Americans and the Russians are well aware of this, right? No one has forgotten what happened with the last peace deal, right? Where the US foreign policy establishment essentially sent Boris Johnson over to scupper the peace deal. I just want to sort of be a bit precise here, by the way. When you say it was the American government, that's sort of technically true, but also sort of not technically true. The people who are running and started the whole Ukraine thing are basically people like Nuland, Kagan, the Atlantic Council, the National Endowment for Democracy, USAID, that sort of nexus that was installed primarily after Dick Cheney and the neocons took over the foreign policy establishment during the Great War on Terror, right? And the neocons have basically been running this show for ages. They're highly interventionist, highly partisan. And now that these organizations, I think the National Endowment for Democracy just got its funding pulled as well. Yay, W's in the chat, boys. National Endowment for Democracy, of course, if you're not aware, it's another organization very, very much like USAID. They go in and they fund civil society organizations, which is code for organizations that will overthrow your government if you start doing things that they don't like. And of course, the number of things that they don't like began expanding exponentially, right? So, first it was, my freedom of speech, and then it was women's rights. Now it's gays' rights, and, all just expands. So it looks like that foreign policy node has been disabled. So the people that are now running US foreign policy are extremely different people.
I wonder why that is there. Sorry, I'm not showing. Let's see. Let's see. So you'll see here. This was a blow to Zelensky. Here is you have Trump blaming Biden for the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and he basically came out and said that this war was over NATO membership, and if he was, and he said this quite a lot. If he was president, had 2020 gone differently, there never would have been a war in the Ukraine. And I'm sorry about all the ads here. Let me see if I can get rid of these.
Well, I mean, Trump is correct, right? Like he wouldn't necessarily have stopped Nuland and all of them sort of pushing the Ukrainians to attack the Donbass, but they would have definitely nixed Ukraine joining NATO, which was sort of the big thing that started. But again, right, like Ukraine had already, in a sense, joined NATO, right? After the 2014 coup, there was an entire process where the whole of the Ukrainian military was integrated into NATO. All of their arms were changed over. They had NATO supply lines. So Ukraine for ages has essentially been half in, basically in NATO, but without Article 5 protection, right? So all the guns, supply lines, intelligence, all this kind of stuff was coming from NATO. The only thing they lacked was formal recognition and, of course, the coveted Article 5. Because if they were covered by Article 5, they could then essentially attack Russia. And when Russia responded, they would be able to trigger Article 5 and then drag, the entire Western world.
Well, it's interesting. I was in Poland a couple of years ago. And right after the sort of war kicked off, I believe about a year. No, not right after, about a year after it started. Not a year, probably 9 months after it began. And it was quite interesting because I was there, and it was during one of the first attempted false flags by Ukraine, where a missile had dropped on Polish territory. I think it was only in some farmland. Turns out, it was a Ukrainian missile, but Ukraine tried to blame it on Russia and therefore tried to say, well, Poland has been attacked. Article 5 needs to be brought in. This is absolutely a part of the broader Russian attempt at taking over and marching all the way to the Atlantic. I mean, you're seeing this rhetoric as well right now, is that constantly they're saying, well, once they're done with Kiev, they're going to march. The armies of darkness will be marching across the face of Europe and then probably taking over, after taking over Europe, moving on New York, Ottawa, and Canberra.
Yeah, I mean, I love how Putin is always mustache man. He's never Stalin, right? Like,
yeah.
despite being Russian, right? You know, because of course we the West allied with Stalin in World War II, right? Because, you know, ally with the communists, like, you know, why not, right? They're never like, oh, you know, Putin is the next Stalin and he will, like, you know, march across Europe. It's, you know, because of course the Western creation myth has very, very little to do with Stalin, because the communists were rehabilitated, you know, post World War II, essentially, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's you see it also just in, for example, all of the political cartoons that go out. He's always mustache man. He's never Mr. Stalin from the country he was. So let's take a look. So what are your thoughts, though, vis-a-vis this upcoming peace conference? That because Trump, he's sending out, that people are already saying that he's sending out all the wrong messages, because he's agreeing that this fight began as a result of trying to basically push Ukraine into NATO. He's saying that if he was president, this fight never would have happened. He's also said that he wants to bring Russia back into the G7 to have it become the G8 again, and that more specifically that he trusts Vladimir Putin. That he's not talking about him as a liar, as a thug. I mean, the vocabulary used by Joe Biden and his administration was just absolutely undiplomatic. And I'm saying that from a point of view is that even when you're having diplomatic crises, you generally don't use language that was used by the Biden administration, words like thug and bully and dictator and pig and all of these kinds of words that he would use to describe Putin. This is not generally how diplomacy works.
No, it's been actually a complete failure of diplomacy. I would go a step further and say that there has been a deliberate attempt by the Atlantic Council, Kagan, Nuland, all of those people, to absolutely make sure that there is no diplomatic contacts between the US and Russia at all, right? To keep the war going. Because if there was any kind of contact, they might actually get to some kind of deal. The US and Russia have not had any high-level diplomatic contacts for 3 years. For 3 years, they have not even exchanged a word, right? And there's been a lot of effort put into making sure this is not the case. So this is a complete, in my opinion, deliberate failure of diplomacy. Trump basically saying, and Hegseth saying the stuff that he was saying, is merely just sort of acknowledging the facts on the ground as they exist, right? The entire West basically seems to have lost their mind and banished their entire diplomatic class, right? If you only had to make peace with your friends, you wouldn't need diplomacy, right? Diplomacy is the art of making peace with your enemies. And to do that, you have to arrive at some kind of deal. And to do this, you have to acknowledge at least the other side's concerns. Russia has been remarkably stable in what they say they want, right? They want no Ukraine in NATO. They want, denazification. They want to get rid of the Banderites in Ukraine. They want a unified security architecture for Europe. So, sort of an agreement that this nearly happened in the 90s, by the way. But then the US turned around and was like, oh, no, you can't be. And this is the thing that a lot of people don't realize. The Atlantic Council and all of their happy glowies have for a long time had the dream of essentially breaking Russia up into about 8 or 9 or 10 smaller countries and just balkanizing it, right? And then, making it much like sort of easier to plunder. Hegseth essentially said that the US has its own problems and that they want to pivot to Asia, right? Hegseth was basically saying, look, we've got our own problems. China's like on the march. We have got to focus on China. Europe, it's time that you take care of yourself. Now, I mean, this is a bit rich coming from the United States, because the reason why Europe has no defense is because of the post-World War II architecture, right? The Americans came in, they opened up bases everywhere, and they've just basically been dominating the entirety of Europe. So it's a bit like breaking somebody's legs and then turning around and being like, oh, well, we need you to walk by yourself now. You know, why are you so weak? It's like, well, you broke my legs and made sure that I could never get out of bed. But this is basically
the entire architecture of the European Union or Europe in general is predicated. All of the pillars of the European Union and their architecture, their stability architecture, have been pulled out. Cheap energy from Russia, an American security umbrella for the continent, plus China as an outlet for their goods. China is already basically moving past importing. I mean, for example, even cars, which would be one of the larger manufactured goods that were being sent over to China. China is now making, $5,000 EV vehicles that almost rival that of Elon Musk's Tesla. So you have basically Chinese now as a market drying up for Europe. You don't have obviously the cheap energy in order to produce anything in Europe. And now that the energy is so expensive, I believe that the LNG that the United States, which Trump is basically using as leverage in his tariff war, saying that Europe has got to take more American energy, is in order of magnitude several times more expensive than what they would get from Russia. And now I believe that they are already AOK'd the removal of 20,000 troops, which is about, I believe they got about 100,000 troops in Europe, the United States military. But they've already 20,000 are coming out. So you have the entirety of what Europe, the post-war model for Europe, crumbling. And I was just going to say, one of the aspects of Europe is that they've always enjoyed trying to, I guess, talk about the United States in terms of what it doesn't have. Well, Europe, we can have endless migration from the Middle East and Africa because we have a welfare state. The funny part is that you can even find leftist rags like The Guardian. And this is the funny part, saying you can have, people on the left, you've got a choice. You can either have socialized medicine, you can have a welfare state, or you can have endless migration. You cannot have both. And this is why you're seeing, for example, all of the health services in these countries that supposedly have free healthcare. It's not free. It's just part of the tax burden. So what you have in all of these countries that have supposedly free healthcare is all of their healthcare systems are crumbling. They're collapsing.
I mean, Europe talks a lot of smack about America, right? For a country that is dependent upon the US for, military protection, right? The Europeans, they love to dunk on the Americans. Oh, Americans, they're so uncivilized. They haven't even banned guns, don't you know, right? Like, meanwhile, right, people are getting like literally horrible things are happening to them on the streets of Europe, right? And they just double. I have not seen anyone in Europe even float the idea of allowing European citizens to actually protect themselves, right?
No, that's the issue. I mean, there was even a case of in Denmark quite recently where a young girl who was being attacked by a new Danish person, or I'm not sure if he was even a new Danish person. He was just in Denmark recently, living on the grace of the state, coming from a country outside of the EU, let's say, who attempted to assault her in a sexual manner, and she resisted with pepper spray, sprayed the guy's face with pepper spray, and she was charged because she was charged with having an illegal weapon, that being pepper spray, to defend herself. But what are you going to do whilst you're being attacked? Oh, hold on a sec. Can you wait a minute? I'm just going to call the police. Yes. Can you come down to X, Y, and Z street, and can you help me out because I'm being attacked by this person? I mean, obviously, you're not allowed to protect yourself. In
the UK, right? We have the literally hilarious position that because of all the stabbings, right? They are now saying that the thing to do is to outlaw kitchen knives that have a point on them, right? So essentially what you have is this sort of displacement activity of government, where you can suggest any solution apart from anything that would actually do anything about the problem,
Well,
right?
I should add to what you're talking about there, is that it's hilarious. I've seen the headlines out of the UK, what Chris is talking about here. And what he might not be talking about is there was an incident, or was late last year, in Southport. Is that correct?
Yeah, Southport. Yes.
Okay, so there was an incident where a number of children were unfortunately lost via the actions of a young man, and those actions were then rolled over. Well, a lot of people were put in jail for telling the truth about this via tweets and social media posts. But what they've been doing is being horrified. How could Amazon, the Amazon killer, how could Amazon have sold a knife? So somehow they're not blaming the person anymore who actually did these things. They're trying to blame Amazon for selling knives. And I think
Yeah.
was it you or
Yeah.
somebody else telling me that they're talking about in the UK of getting rid of the pointy ends
Yes.
on
Yes.
knives.
That's what I
You know,
that's what I was saying.
mm,
And essentially what we are seeing here, and I never thought it would come to this, but this really seems to be what is actually happening to Europe, right? Because they cannot acknowledge that groups of people are different, they are literally going to destroy their own countries. It is the craziest thing. It's like Lysenko, like
mhm,
deciding, oh, we've got to plant the wheat in wet soil in the middle of winter, and just throw out, just because we cannot acknowledge that groups of people are different, right? It's like this idea of social constructionism has just taken over everything, right? Like genetics don't matter anymore. Nothing. Everyone is the same, and it's this weird version of like magic soil, right?
mm.
Supposedly, right? The idea that a people is sort of bonded to their soil. You're not allowed to say that, right? That's nationalism, right? We have the inverse idea where as soon as somebody steps off the boat onto English soil, they just magically become English. It's an amazing sort of process, right? Like they're just, magically transformed into, yeah, it is really, really ludicrous. It's insane.
Yeah, the magic soil is the same thing in every Western country. Supposedly, the moment somebody steps onto the magic soil in Canada, Australia, the UK, Sweden, doesn't matter. They automatically become. For example, my favorite part is with Justin Trudeau. There was, he talks about welcoming to the Canadian family, and he literally believes. I don't know if he believes, but he espouses the idea that people coming from hardline countries, very conservative hardline countries, are going to magically become Trudeauists the moment they step foot on Canadian soil. They're going to be all for whatever the flight of fancy that somebody like Trudeau has. Because the one thing about this sort of ideology as well is it's constantly shifting because the revolution never ends. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's part of it. I just want to quickly finish up on our talking about
Yeah. We
Zelensky
should do the super
and
chat
then,
as well, because
and then move on. Yeah. So from Savage Savant, $10. Thanks very much. Is J.D. Vance being authentic or Machiavellian? Will he genuinely carry on the MAGA banner, or change course and become a political animal? That's a good question. I do see J.D. Vance probably being the front runner, at least now, for 2028. He's probably the most high profile. He's still young as well. And he does tick a lot of the right boxes. He's got an intercultural marriage. And one of the things I should say is that James Carville, I'm not sure if people are familiar with him, but James Carville has been a long time Democrat strategist. He had a TV show on a program. It might have been on MSNBC. It could have been on CNN. I can't remember. But he was one of the main architects of the Bill Clinton White House and the policies of getting the Democrats back into power after 12 years, after the Reagan administration and the first Bush administration. They came up with Bill Clinton as being much more of a centrist Democrat. I mean, he was for expelling illegal immigrants. He was for tough policies on crime. I believe it was under Bill Clinton, and also voted for by Joe Biden for the 3 strikes you're out laws in the United States for 3 felonies. But this James Carville, he's been a strategist for the Democratic Party, I believe in what he said was 40 years or 50 years of his life. And I don't know if you know that I don't remember which, some sort of Florida school that got shot up a couple years back. There was some bald girl, and the two sort of figureheads, or the 2 talking heads that came out of it, were a bald Latino girl, or shaved head bald Latino girl, and another guy named David Hogg. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah, I know David Hogg's head of the Democratic Party.
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
I mean, it's just, I mean, Carville was basically losing his mind. He's like, what the hell? Well, they've been taken over by the communists, right?
Remember right. So, but David Hogg has been voted in as the vice chair of the Democratic Party, and he's basically saying, "What the hell? Like, we're going to deserve to be in the political wilderness. We deserve it. I mean, because basically voting in this guy, we've lost the male vote. And
if I could answer,
go ahead.
Right. Okay. So look, JD Vance is being authentic and he is being Machiavellian. He is a political animal and he is for MAGA, right? The problem is that throughout the West, most people have become used to a style of politics that is based entirely around deception. Machiavelli called these kind of people the foxes, right? Who they rule by stealth, they rule through craftiness, rhetoric, and deceit. And Machiavelli contrasted these people to another group called the Lions, right? The Lions use military force liberally, they speak plainly, they do not suffer fools. And Machiavelli had this idea that the Lions and the foxes always sort of wind up swapping positions, right? MAGA, generally speaking, the Trump administration, generally speaking, are lions, right? That is their style of political rule. So it's not. People tend to think that to be Machiavellian is always to rule deceitfully, but that's not actually true. I would also, by the way, recommend anyone, if you're into this, to read Machiavelli's Discourses on Livy, which is awesome. Right.
Yeah, so this is coming up. Basically, the DNC is lambasted for beyond parity in its leadership vote that included singing gender rules and can't stop laughing. And the James Carville, it's a long piece, so I'm not going to play it for us right now. But here he is. This is James Carville, and I think a lot of people might notice he's kind of an interesting character because I think a lot of people don't generally recognize he's got a very, very strong, harsh Southern drawl, and which is kind of unusual for a huge Democrat supporter. You don't generally see people that talk with a really thick Southern drawl. But you guys can take a look at him. He's a very interesting character, and he's pretty much said that the Democratic Party is thrown away. It hasn't had any introspection whatsoever on why it lost the last election as badly as it did, and now it's just pushing the margins even further. And how it's kind of interesting because people were saying for a long time that as the Republican Party, as America's demographics change, pretty soon there will never be another Republican president. But what's coming out now is that because of the absolute shift from the center by the Democrats, it doesn't matter what your particular skin tone is. It's just it goes beyond any kind of human understanding on reality. These people are fanatics, and the only people they speak to are other fanatics, and they don't, because most people generally tend toward the center politically, and whether you're on center to the right, center to the left, most people do, and this is where elections are won or lost.
Well, this is one of the problems with ruling by deceit, right, and ruling through lies and hidden rule. Okay, it works really, really well for a while because you can do all this stuff and nobody knows who to blame, right? This is basically how the US has been ruled for ages, a sort of crypto government ruled by deceit. The problem is, though, right, when the rubber hits the road, no one's going to defend you because no one knows who's in charge. I mean, if you look at the general psychological tenor of the US over like the past decade, right? One of the reasons why things like QAnon and conspiracy theories and stuff have proliferated is because no one actually knew who was ruling the country. Look at all the revelations about USAID, right? There are tons of people who could see what was happening in the world with all this, spreading of leftist stuff. They blame the Chinese, they blame all these other groups, they blame the Illuminati. It was the US government.
Mm.
It turns out all along, much like COVID, it was actually the US government, or a cabal inside the US government that had basically hijacked.
Not the Chi-Coms. Definitely not the Chi-Coms.
It wasn't the Chi-Coms. It was USAID, National Endowment for Democracy, and all of these US government attached glow orgs, right? So no one's going to stand up for that, right? If you're a hidden power, no one can say that's our ruler, right? And then everyone starts freaking out because they've got no idea who's in charge. In the current administration, everybody knows who it is who's in charge. Trump's in charge, right? If it goes well, he will accrue all the benefits. If it goes bad, he will accrue all of the negative attention.
Well, I agree. Let's because we've already been going. We've got about 15 minutes left. Let's move on and take a look at some other things that we've been looking at. So I wanted to. There's just so much. I really apologize, guys. There's just too much to get through today. Let me just go through here. I'm just going to let me see. Sorry.
Get your super chats in as well, boys. If you want us to answer your questions, now is the time. Support a struggling streamer. Buy us a beer. We'll answer your deeply pointed questions.
Absolutely.
Link is in the chat.
All right, so I'm gonna share this right now, and get rid of that. So we're gonna watch a little bit. This is Christine Amanpour's X account. Now, again, it's very interesting. I should say is that in Asia, where I'm currently, and outside of the American Western Europe bubble, it's kind of interesting because there are no celebrity reporters. They don't exist. For example, I heard that because CNN is struggling as it is, the pay package for somebody like Anderson Cooper has gone down from $50 million. I don't know what it is, but I remember reading that his pay package was somewhat reduced because nobody's watching CNN anymore. MSNBC was another one where these star reporters, I mean, they're news readers, and they're making, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 million a year. Whereas, Christine Amanpour is one of these people, and I've watched her stuff. This woman is absolutely clueless. She's absolutely clueless. I think she came up during the first Gulf War. As
they're all CIA, mate. They are clearly all CIA.
Right. All right. So what we're going to do is while I'm getting everything else done. So, for example, sorry, we got one more super.
We got a few super chats as well, actually.
Yeah. So, this is again by Not a Band account. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Will GOP Congress bravely pass CR for Biden budget?
Maybe. Continuing resolution for Biden budget is definitely a possibility. Although, if they manage to cut as much from the US government as they're planning to do, they might have much more headroom than they thought. It's going to be hard to tell. Also, we got one from Ardent Party for $1. The same Canadians who supported Trudeau's gun bans are now claiming they would take up arms to defend Canada against US aggression. Where are you going to get them? Well, you get them from the government, obviously. Ardent, if it is in the interests of the government to arm the citizens, then they will do it because they believe that it will be the Americans. Although personally, given the sort of general tenor of the mood in Canada, I would be very surprised if the Trudeau government would countenance arming their population in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, actually, again, going on Canada, let me just bring this up. If you're interested, guys, I made it's only been out for a couple of hours, this video here, and it discusses a lot of these. There we go. It discusses a lot of the issues regarding Canada, and not only the threat for annexation, but it does go into. Let me share this for you guys. It goes into. Let me see. There we are. It's my newest video here. Is Canada's dirty secret makes annexation inevitable. and it goes into basically how Canada has become not only an international joke, it's isolated itself, and just even culturally, it doesn't really have, and it's by design. You know, they've broken Canada into nothing more than a global economic zone, which is what they're trying to do for most of the West. It does appear to me, though, and as an Australian, you can probably you know, chime in on this. It does seem like the smaller Anglo countries are used as laboratories for any of these globalist sort of undertakings. So they've been working on Canada for such a long time, where you actually had a prime minister of the country 10 years ago saying that Canada is a post-national state with no core culture and nothing for the millions upon millions upon millions of people that are arriving to assimilate to. So you literally had the head of state saying, well, we don't really have a country, right? And then you know, when you have something like this with the United States, I mean, then oh no, today is the 15th of February, and that's why I released this video on this day. And the video goes into, this is the 60th anniversary of the raising of the maple leaf flag. Prior to the maple leaf flag, it was the red ensign. I could probably find that for you guys. Let me see. A lot of people might not even know this. Red ensign.
Also, I've just posted a link to my latest video essay over on my distributed warfare channel. 4B Feminism and Lysistrata. It just sort of examines feminism and how basically human nature never changes by looking at the works of Aristophanes from about 300 BC. Check it out. It's quite good. It's got, like, you know, proper video essay and all that kind of other stuff if you're into that.
All right, so today is the 60th anniversary of the raising of the maple leaf. Prior to that, this was the flag of Canada, the red ensign. It's pretty simple. It's the four founding peoples of Canada. You have Scotland, England, Ireland, and France in the coat of arms there, and then the Union Jack in the canton there. And it was 60 years ago today that this flag was lowered and the maple leaf was raised. And in the video, I talk about how I believe it's 6 former prime ministers of Canada are begging people now to become patriotic, fly the flag, you know, because Canada is at risk of being annexed by the United States, blah, 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 blah. But they've spent the last 60 years deconstructing the country and turning it into a global flea market.
Yeah,
and
look, the UK has exactly the same problem, right? They're trying to, join the army now, right? It's like, well, why? Right? Like, I mean, you just spent like literally decades being like, is the UK even a country, bro? Right? Do the English even have a culture? Right? Like, do white people even exist, bro? And like, you're seriously expecting these people to join the army. It's not going to happen, man. Like, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's the same in Canada. I mean, you're not going to get people in the military unless you force conscription. It's literally ridiculous. And again, I should say that this is today. As you watch, guys, this is the 60th anniversary of the raising of the leaf flag. Now, tell me in the chat, okay, this is the former Canadian flag, the red ensign. 1 for red ensign being the better flag, or 2 for the maple leaf. I think I'm going to know this, but I think that this the original Canadian flag is a much nicer looking flag than the leaf that the country has now.
I don't know, Felix. That flag, it looks a bit racist to me, mate. It sort of, it conjures images of colonialism. I don't know. It's a bit problematic.
Oh, well, that's exactly it. And it's also exclusionary because, up until, 20 years ago, Canada was basically made up. 95% of the population was made up by these 4 founding groups: the Scots, the English, the Irish, and the French. So it's exclusionary as well. So we're getting a couple of 1s, we're getting some 2s. Remember 1? Yeah, it's definitely overwhelmingly 1. Not a bandit count. Not a bandit count. He's going for the 2. He's a hardcore maple leafer.
But, should we address that super chat about Zelensky, by the way?
Let's do that.
You want to stick that back up?
Yeah.
Who was that? Who said that?
Savage Savant.
What do you think Zelensky's playing at? Okay, look, this is very, very simple to answer. Zelensky is trying to prolong the war, right? I mean, I don't want to get too spicy on Maine, but let's just put it this way. If Zelensky's goal had been to destroy Ukraine as a country, there's nothing he could have done better to bring that about. He has opposed any kind of peace deal, any kind of cessation of hostilities at every single turn. Not just him, of course, but his backers. When the war first broke out and people were saying this, the goal of the war was to destroy Ukraine. I was like, oh, that sounds a bit rich. But now, after 3 years, I'm kind of like, well, they kind of have a point. It's like you just keep throwing children into like the wolf pit and just being like, oh, wow, we're running out of kids here. Like, well, we've got even younger kids. Let's chuck them in the
absolutely. That they've already lowered the age of conscription from 27 to 25, and I believe that if the United States agrees to more funding for the Ukraine state, they'll lower it to 18. Interestingly enough, $100 billion of the aid that has gone to Ukraine has just disappeared, and I'll bring this up. So
Zelensky's like, where did the 100 billion go? I have no idea. Did you know I am missing $100 billion?
Yeah. So the whole with Zelensky playing at, I don't see anything other than extending the war, because right now the problem with this is as long as he's president, he's not a legitimate president at this point. Elections have been suspended since the election should have been held in May of last year. He's using the pretext that the country is under martial law, therefore the country can't have elections. I mean, we should remember that 160 years ago, during the American Civil War, during a time when all they had were horse and buggies and very, very rudimentary electoral processes, America was still able to hold an election during the bloodiest war in American history. So it's a very interesting thing. But the point is that Russia's already come out and said we won't deal with Zelensky because we don't recognize him internationally under international law as a legitimate president, because he has suspended elections within his country. So it's all of these kind of problems that are there to extend the war. Also, if the war ends, he's out. I mean, he's not going to. And the United States is already under Trump. They're already talking about removing him because he is the biggest obstacle specifically to peace within.
So the plan I've heard on the grapevine is that they're going to call for elections. They're going to sort of massage it, get somebody else into power, someone they can do business with, and then they will basically sort of force peace terms on that new leader, because you're absolutely right. Zelensky is no longer the legitimate ruler of Ukraine. You can't sign a treaty with someone who is not the legitimate ruler of a country. Also, we have a super chat from Leston Jones. Hang on, guys. The Union flag excludes Wales as a country in the UK. Do you think that's fine? Because I'm not bloody Englishman. I do apologize, Leston. As a bit of a foreigner, I do find it a little bit difficult remembering all the parts of the UK, especially given the sort of overwhelming UK messaging, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah, so Europeans as well. This is where Europe and thanks for the super chat, very much appreciate it. Yeah, Wales is in it. Well, Wales, I mean, their flag. I mean, I know they have a dragon flag, so it'd be kind of hard to incorporate that into the Union flag. But anyway. I mean, I'm saying that as not a person from Britain. Again, this is where Britain, not Britain. I'm getting ahead of myself. This is where Europe and America fundamentally disagree, because the United States is already signaling that they don't see Zelensky as being a partner to the peace process, because as Russia's pointed out, they aren't. He's not a legitimate president of the country anymore. His term has expired, and according to the Ukrainian constitution, the power should have been devolved to the parliament and the speaker, and it hasn't. So the funny part is that the European leaders are saying, well, we want to be at the big boy table where Trump has already said that we don't need you. You're not pulling any, you're not pulling your weight there. You're not pulling your weight even in your own countries. We don't need you. But you've got French President Emmanuel Macron saying only Zelensky can negotiate with Putin, and it must avoid capitulation. Now, it just, I don't know where these guys are or what they're drinking, the Kool-Aid or whatever.
Can I just point out as well, Zelensky has actually made it illegal for him to negotiate with the Russians.
Exactly.
He passed the law back in 2022, I believe, that makes it actually illegal for them to negotiate with the Russians. So
that law would have to be repealed, but I'm sure he's got some sort of explanation where it doesn't apply to him. So
mate, it's such a cluster truck. Like,
yeah, absolutely. So we've got a whole bunch of this kind of just malarkey. I mean, let's call it what it is. It is malarkey. And I like that word. It's kind of been rekindled since our friend Joe Biden used it quite a lot.
I invented that word. Malarkey. That's my thing. Trump better not steal it. By the way, have you got any children around?
I need a little sniff to keep me going.
I just need a sniff. I'm very, very lonely. Since you kicked me out of the White House.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we're definitely in a weird state. I want to do a couple more things. Let's move specifically over to the United States because we've kind of done a lot on Europe today. This is just a kind of an interesting one. Let me bring this up. Is Elon Musk is a father for I don't know, the 15th or 16th, or I'm not sure exactly how many times, but I think
it's the 8th. If you're talking about Ashley Sinclair, I believe it's the 8th.
Yeah. He's let's see, sure. So Ashley Sinclair is she's I don't know, some Twitter influencer or something like that.
Is this really global news, Felix?
Oh no. The reason I want to bring this up because it is interesting in the sense that what I find interesting about it is this girl was up until just a little while ago within the right wing, because the funny thing about right wing men is they want to hear pretty girls speak back their own beliefs to them, right? So you're a pretty girl, you've got a nice shape. All you got to do to get noticed is start with right wing talking points. And the girl's, yeah, she's pretty. I think she's
every man wants to hear a pretty girl echo their stuff
back. Oh, absolutely.
It's not a right wing thing, right?
Yeah.
Unless you happen to be gay, in which case I don't know, you want a sort of a nice they them to speak your words back to you.
Absolutely.
This is perfectly normal, right?
Oh, it is. The part is that most of these people that are doing so, they're very flip-floppity in those beliefs, right? And you've seen it time and time again, is that when the grift kind of wears off, it's like, oh well, I'm now an enlightened centrist. Oh no, now I'm an enlightened leftist. I'm leaving behind the cult of MAGA. I'm leaving behind the cult of right wing. It's a cult that hates women, and I reject everything I've been saying for the last 2 years and made millions of dollars off of. So anyway, yeah, I thought I'd bring this up. So I wore my MAGA hat on a plane and made it out alive. A true accomplishment in the world of the deranged liberals. I mean, it's one of the
look at owning the lefties there, mate.
Owning the libs by wearing my hat. Owning the libs. I made it out alive.
Have you seen the stuff Milo Yiannopoulos has been posting?
No, man, I don't follow Milo.
He's got all the receipts, and that dude is dangerous. He's got all the receipts. Apparently, she was gunning for Elon for like literally years, basically. Right?
I imagine so. Even on my own Twitter handle, let me find that. There was a guy who was watching her posts on Twitter a few years ago. And where is he now? Just go. There we go. Home.
I mean, she is pretty, right? I mean, like,
Oh yeah,
I don't know what her personality is like. I've never really seen her chat. Has anyone actually like watched her on?
I haven't. I've not.
On video?
But this is kind of an interesting thing. Let me see. Let me go to my
one in the chat for would smash. 2 in the chat for would not smash.
Smash or pass, chat. Smash or pass.
We're dealing with like the burning global issues of the day.
Yeah, smash.
This is the soap opera segment of the show, clearly.
Right here, there was a guy. Let me see if I can bring this up. Blue Collar Union Railroader. I don't know if you guys could see it. I'll try to make it bigger. That's about as big as I can make it. He said back in 2023, he basically said that this is going to be Elon's next baby mama at some point, because he just goes through how she's basically constantly trying to get Elon to notice her. So this guy had it all figured out 2 years ago. Blue Collar Union Railroader on Twitter, and he's come back and said nailed it, and he's right, because she I mean, imagine if you are a billionaire like Elon Musk. And I mean, I read that he has a compound somewhere in Texas where a number of his baby mamas live together in a sort of commune with their kids. So he's got sort of an open harem, right?
He's basically Muslim.
He's living his best life. Let's just say that he's living his best life. More power to him, right?
I mean, look, he's not burdening the state with him, so I don't really.
Oh, he's not marrying any of them. He just goes from one to the next, impregnates them and moves on to the next one. I mean, good for him. I mean, he's got the money, and he's got the wherewithal.
Would you have a lot of ones in the chat?
I'm sorry.
Well, I asked the chat if they would smash or pass. We have a lot of smashings.
Smash for smash or pass. There is this one. Yeah, I thought about this as well. We were talking about Milo Yiannopoulos. As the last I heard of him, he did an expose on Lauren Southern, and
that was
she
ages
responded. Ago. But I don't really follow this stuff so much. That's the last thing I remember him doing. And Nudge Unit is saying Lauren Southern missed out. Yeah, she really did. I think there's these girls know each other. So Lauren Southern ended up unfortunately as a single parent. And I'm not sure if the father's in her child's life, and Ashish Sinclair had a baby with a billionaire, so one of the things about that is if you become one of Elon Musk's baby mamas, I don't think you're ever going to have to worry about a single thing for the rest of your life.
Oh yeah. No, you'd be set. You'd be set.
I mean, like you basically, you become one of his baby mamas. I mean, you're not going to want for anything, he could probably buy her, even more of her social media credibility if he wants. I mean, so
he could buy you 1 million Cybertrucks.
Exactly. I do like this comment number 3 for a beat. Just leave it at that.
Bruh.
So is she St. Clair? That sounds like a pretty British name. I don't know if that's her real name. She looks kind of like a Latina almost, I would say.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to tell. With Americans,
Yeah, well, I don't know. St. Clair though sounds like a very Anglo name. I wonder if that's a real name though. I don't know many people with Saint anything in their family name. Do you? Like, hello, I'm Saint Bernard. Nice to meet you. I'm Mr. Saint Bernard. I'm Mr. Saint Nicholas. It's a very unusual.
Yeah, but the Americans are descended from a lot of the English, so it's not surprising that you've
No, what I'm saying, do you know anybody with a surname that has Saint in it?
No, not now, but I have. Yeah. It's also French as well. The French also have a bunch of.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
So there's no telling. Like.
Yeah, that's true. Let's see. Yeah, people are also going on about how Lauren Southern has not resurfaced in a long time since allegations. Are they allegations, Chad? I'm not sure if it's been proven that she's been having an affair with Destiny. And he's in a lot of trouble these days. I don't know Destiny, and I don't actually follow anything, but I have seen posts that he's in some kind of trouble over his antics of some sort. But anyway,
he was filming in a compromising position with what's his name, The Catboy Ranch dude.
Nick Fuentes.
Fuentes, yeah, allegedly. I don't know. I'm not big into the right wing drama.
Oh, this is neither am I. I don't really know. This is an interesting comment from Paul. He says that Ashley St. Clair identified herself as Jewish. I didn't know that. That's people are saying, yeah, it's St. Clairstein. Okay, that's something I wouldn't know. Yeah, okay, interesting. And people are saying it's usually you'll see it bastardized as to Sinclair. Okay, Sinclair's a very common name. Yeah, it's a very common name.
Yeah.
And people are coming up. Yeah, I'll just leave that as a text rather than
disavow.
Yeah, disavow entirely.
Although I did see a clip of Destiny basically claiming that he didn't know what the Bolsheviks were. He thought they were a Weimar art movement.
I've seen the same clip. It was it's unfortunate. I think he's definitely a bright guy. I don't know how anyone who lives in the United States and can actually believe the kinds of things that he does. But
are we out of actual stories to talk about, by the way?
Oh, absolutely bloody not. No, we've got way too many. Okay, let me bring something up here.
Thank you for joining us for the right-wing gossip section of the show.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that. We appreciate it. Let me just bring up my other brother. I've got them separated, the kind of stories that we have of one and the other. Hold on a sec. I'll bring this up for now just so I can, let's see.
It's crazy how much stuff's happened in the last week.
All right. Okay. This is something I'd like to talk about here.
Okay.
So Trump has been getting a lot of pushback by the judges and a lot of the sort of executive orders that he's been trying to push through. And one of them is birthright citizenship. And what you have, it's an industry, and it's not just in the US. I don't know what it is. It's the Anglo world. Like Canada has birthright citizenship. I believe Australia has birthright citizenship as well. And am I right in that?
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Okay, I know Canada does. I know the UK does. But it's the Anglo countries that do. And what this is it's created an industry. When a woman is 8 months and 3 weeks pregnant, she'll fly to the US. She'll fly to Los Angeles from wherever, from China, from Mexico, from wherever, and drop her kid. And the kid automatically becomes an American citizen with all the rights and privileges that entails. Wait a couple of years. I mean, you can even, for example, it's been used as a reason. Well, I'm here illegally, but my child is American, so therefore I should have the right to stay here as well, right? So what you're having is President Trump has pretty much gone along the lines of, well, this is not actually a normal thing, and it's not. The vast majority, and it's not just countries outside of the West. Countries like Germany, countries like the Netherlands, there's a lot of countries in Europe as well that also don't allow birthright citizenship. You have to have some sort of legitimate, some sort of legitimacy to your claim for citizenship. A lot of times it has to be your parents, obviously, because it's pretty bizarre that the idea is that you could be, one of your parents is from, I don't know, Somalia, and your other parents from China, and you just happen to be born in the United States, and therefore you're American as apple pie. It doesn't make any sense. And Donald Trump has been trying to revoke this right. Yeah, I agree. He's been trying to revoke this birthright citizenship, and he's falling into a lot of troubles with this. And if people are honest with themselves, they'll know that the entirety of birthright citizenship was predicated after the Civil War on allowing American slaves, or the descendants of slaves, a part of citizenship for the United States. Because prior to this, the African Americans in the United States weren't considered citizens, right? And it was created to cement their right to citizenship and then their right to vote later on, where it was never meant to be this global shopping market of citizenships that it's become today. And so it is kind of interesting. I mean, I have friends. I had this American couple that I knew quite a while ago, and they didn't really plan things out very well. They both went into severe student debt at a private Christian university in Texas. Didn't really get jobs, and were just under enormous, the size of a mortgage. I think they were both like $150,000 in debt when they graduated, 300 grand together. And then they didn't pay payments, so it just ballooned, obviously, as you can imagine. So they just went off to Thailand to hide, and that's where I met them. And they had their child in Thailand, and that child was not in any. Interestingly, Thailand as well has socialized medicine, but as far as I can tell, it works a lot better than it does in Canada or the UK, because they don't have things like birthright citizenship and mass immigration. So they have the ability to focus the money that they would need to on, they can project what they need that money for. But the child was born there, so it didn't have any right to education, healthcare, or any of the other things all the other kids in Thailand would have, because the kid wasn't considered Thai.
So someone said that Australia doesn't have birthright citizenship. That makes sense. I haven't been there in a while, actually. So yeah, thank you for that random person in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
anyone Canada, does it have? I'm not sure.
Trump is apparently, I'm not a constitutional expert, but apparently how you read the Constitution on this, it's one of the amendments, I believe. I think you're right. It was
I think it's the 14th Amendment. It's the 14th Amendment.
14. It is the 14th, right? Mm-hmm. Apparently, depending on how you read it, it either supports it or doesn't support it. So it's probably going to have to go to the Supreme Court to figure out the interpretation on this. And of course, the leftists are launching tons and tons of lawsuits at the moment. I think this is a lot of why, if you saw that James O'Keefe thing where he got somebody on camera from, I think it was from the NIH. He was basically saying that the entire Biden government at the end of its term was just funneling money out of the door, like literally as fast as it could, presumably so they could fund more resistance against Trump and just undermine his entire term pretty much.
So I think this is Alexander Weissman. He's got a good sort of take on this. I've got nothing against birthright citizenship. It's only been an issue for the U.S., whose borders basically with third world countries. The U.S. should forbid birthright citizenship for illegal aliens. I agree. I mean, if you're in the United States legally and you have a child, I don't see a problem with it either. But that's not the point. People that are arriving, and I mean, they even have a term for it, anchor babies, right? So.
Yeah, well, now with modern air travel, like everyone really shares a border with the third world. If you think about it, it's not like anyone, well, I mean, unless you're Mexican, crosses an actual land border, right? The situation on the U.S.'s southern border is extremely anomalous, right? And obviously was done deliberately so they could just import more.
Well, it is like where you have perhaps I don't know how, it depends on how you register or gauge development of a country. Under the boxes you tick, for example. I mean, the United States, in a lot of respects, doesn't tick a lot of the boxes that one would think for a developed country. But at the same time, it is, as a country, the wealthiest place on the planet. And for that, you've got basically the wealthiest country on the planet bordering like all the way down to the Southern Hemisphere, just endless poverty. So, yeah, it is a very anomalous place on the planet because, I mean, even with the crisis in the UK with the small boats, and that meaning migrants coming from France, they're coming from one developed country to another, right? The United Kingdom doesn't border. I mean, it's quite incredible that the UK is having a migrant crisis because it is an island, and it doesn't have.
No, because they're deliberately not doing anything about it.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah. This is a constructed crisis. I mean, they could end it like that if they wanted to. I mean, we saw that with COVID. I memean, they could close borders real fast if they want to.
Yeah. It's amazing how that works. When the government doesn't want to do something, they're like, oh, it's so complicated. I wish we could do something, but there's all these laws. When they want to do something, boom, right? Turn on a dime. Look what happened with COVID. Exactly, right? Like, oh, what about the human rights consideration? As soon as COVID happens, oh, you got no rights,
Yeah, exactly. So, so this is the thing with with Trump, a lot of his executive orders, he's going to have to, even like, for example, with the, I'm just kind of switching gears, but also with the Department of Education, it's going to take congressional approval to to dismantle the Department of Education. So because of these executive orders, they can be overturned when the next Democratic president comes in. He's going to have to do things. If he can't get congressional approval, he's just going to have to gut these things so badly that it's going to be so difficult for any incoming hostile regime to basically make any changes in it, is what I would say.
Yeah, I think it was either Trump or Vance who addressed this point. Actually, I think it was Vance. Someone asked him about this, and he was like, "Well, look, right, nothing's forever, but the idea basically is to sort of gut these institutions and to make things sort of like so difficult for them that they'd have to start the long march through the institutions all over again, right? And the long march takes
I agree. This
really
is
long
something
time.
they're going to have to do. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So the long march takes a long time. I mean, the current one that the US is dealing with really started in the 60s. So that's 60. Well, after the 60s, all the radicals moved into education. So you're sort of talking like the early 70s. So that's like 50 years it took them to set this up. And now Trump is basically going to dismantle all of it in a couple of years, and then they'll have to start all over again, right? So the US should at least get 10 or 20 years of peace. I don't know where they would go this time, honestly. The whole thing after the 60s was, we're going to get into education because we can mold the minds of the youth, and then once we've molded the minds of the youth, we can turn them all into like little activists. And you're seeing the result from the Department of Education now, but they're now going through it and just removing all the DEI stuff and setting up. This is the other thing as well. They know that these institutions aren't going to disband DEI voluntarily. So they're setting up like snitch lines and all this kind of other stuff. I reckon give it a few months and they will start firing or prosecuting people if they start pushing that stuff in schools. So it's going to be very, very different.
Yeah. We have a kind of an interesting comment here is that Canada is one of the few countries outside the US that adheres to unconditional birthright citizenship under Canadian law. Any Canadian born child is granted citizenship regardless. And this is kind of interesting. I've heard in Canada, it's also granting citizenship to those that aren't even looking for it. Like, say, for example, your parent or somebody in your family is Canadian. Oh, well, you can have it now. Like they're handing it out like bubble gum. So it's I don't know. It's a weird country. Let's see. Let's have one more thing here, and then we will close it out. If you'd like to get any super chats in, people, it'd be very much appreciated. Let's see. We've kind of this is too much stuff. I mean, I've got so many tabs. It's just sorry about that, guys. It's just taking me a while to go through and try and figure out what to even talk about.
Well, the big thing coming up, of course, is going to be
here we go.
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia, but we kind of already talked about that. We have here.
This is terrible.
Yeah, actually, you know what? I don't want to go out on a bad note. Let's not do that. Basically, this is like every day. This is
it's every day.
Let's just go out on a good note. Are you working on any projects right now, or any videos you got coming out?
Yeah, so I just released a video essay on my distributed warfare channel, which is 4B feminism, Aquatofana, and Lysistrata. So it's basically tracing sort of it's looking at an ancient play from 300 BC by Aristophanes called Lysistrata, and basically how men and women haven't changed.
I know exactly of that play. Yeah, exactly. I've read about it several times.
You can find that on Distributed Warfare. You can get all of my links at newsfist.net. I also do a twice weekly news show on Monday and Thursday. Come along. It's very, very comfy. We got a nice chat going on.
All right.
How about you, Felix? So you did that video on Canada. You got anything else on the pipeline?
Yeah, I've got that video up, guys. That video up on Canada. It's just fresh off the plate. It's a couple hours. Now it'd be about 4 or 5 hours old. It's kind of a deep dive into the Canadian psyche as well. I kind of talk about it as the dirty secret of Canada, and not to give too much away, but it does involve inferiority complexes that are masked by airs of superiority and little maple leaves. I've got another video coming out probably tomorrow, and it's going to be sort of a continuation of a video I made years ago, but updated on what dystopia as predicted in movies going all the sci-fi movies that were all the way back to the 1970s, and which sci-fi movies more accurately predicted the dystopia that we live in today. I've got another video coming out soon on the potential. I mean, there was a few hair bands in the 1980s that were helped and pushed by the CIA into Russia, into the Soviet Union, in order to disrupt communism. I have a whole video on the perhaps psyop of 80s pop music and how it was very, very different from other eras in pop music. Very different. And basically the collapse of pop music after the 1980s, early 90s with the fall of the Soviet Union. So I've got those. Hopefully I'm going to be doing a call-in show sometime this week. I'm trying to get my schedule done so I can just start putting these in. And so, for example, guys, this is every week at this time, this video, sorry, this live stream with me and Newsfist. So that's a regular thing. So I'm going to be starting to do a couple more regular live streams. And I'm going to be up my other channel, Felix Rex, on YouTube as well. I'm going to be basically with that channel, I'm going to be looking at, it's kind of hard to explain, but not only the history of urbanism but just more of the, I'm going to call it town, country, city, or maybe not in that order, country, city, town, looking at everything from the difference between gridiron cities like New York and organic cities like London and radial cities like Paris, and how they interact with the human psyche, talking about things like that. It's going to be probably more of my mind going off in directions that are not political, but that I do find interesting. Probably a very niche channel. I'm not sure everyone will, it's not for everyone's cup of tea. So yeah, that's about it. We've been going 2 hours now. So I want to thank everybody.
When my brain gives out, mate.
I want to thank everybody who's been here. It's been a pleasure to have as well have you on the channel here with us, Newsfist. And I want to say thanks to everyone who's been watching. Also, thanks very much for the super chats. They are appreciated. And we will see you next week.
Yep. Thanks for coming, everyone. See you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.